Welcome back to the Stranger Tupan Photography channel. Today we are going to see about the section 2 of the exposure. So we are going to learn about the aperture today. Let's be with me and let's continue.
Aperture is the first three combining factors which create an exposure. So understanding the aperture is a good way of getting the grasp with taking a well exposed photo. There are also negative and creative effects of different apertures. This section will teach you what they are and how to use them to your advantage. What exactly is the aperture? The best way to understand aperture is to think of the way in which the pupil of your eye changes size to let in the different amounts of light. The wider it gets, the more light let in. Together, the aperture, shutter speed and ISO produce an exposure. The diameter of the aperture changes to allow more or less light onto the sensor depending on the situation. Choice of aperture can be used for a creative effect, but there are also consequences of using different apertures which are tackled in a moment. But when talking about the light and exposure, wider aperture allows more light, narrow apertures allow less. How is aperture measured and changed? Aperture is measured using something called the f-stop scale. On your camera you will see f followed by a number. The number denotes how wide the aperture is, which in turn affect the exposure and the depth of field. The lower the number, the wider the aperture. This may seem confusing. Why a low number for a high aperture? The answer is simple and mathematical, but first you need to know the f-stop scale. The scale is as follows. Say, for example, you have a 50mm lens with the aperture of f2. To find the width of the aperture, you divide the 50 by the 2, giving you a diameter of 25 mm. You then have to take the radius, half of the diameter, times it by itself to create the radius squared and times by the pi. The whole equation looks something like this. Area is equals to pi times r square. Here are a couple of examples. Now, it doesn't take a genius to work out that half of the 490 is less than 251. This is due to the rounding error. The area of f2.8 will still be exactly half of f2. This is what aperture scale looks like in reality.